You have to send an Evoke.
Show me. My name is Alchemy, and this is an urgent Evoke. Wherever you are, whoever you are, if you found this message, it's your destiny to join us. Humanity needs our help. If you have a problem and you can't solve it alone, evoke it.
Hello, good evening, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure being here tonight. I have a bad news. I am not Arturo Muento Kunigami. I am not Senior ICT Policy Specialist. I am Puig. I am a ICT Policy Specialist. Eventually, I'll become senior, but I'm very happy to be here with you tonight. I work for the World Bank, and you may or not know that well. That institution, it's a financing institution, it's a financing but a knowledge bank too. And in this particular case, I would like to explain and to share with you what role can gamification play in the development world, in particularly in the education sector. That's what we're going to focus on today. So just to give you a brief introduction on the World Bank and education sector, as we said, is a financial institution. You can see more than 11 billion for financing, and it has operations in more than 70 countries in this particular sector. It's an institution with more than 180 countries. So that's just one of the sectors of activity, and it has influence on more than 60 million children in primary school, with the goal of being a knowledge bank for educating for a knowledge-driven global economy. So education has been being focused in order to create the right skills for a knowledge economy, but perhaps we should wonder, are we going towards a knowledge economy or towards a quest economy? Here, I'm going to use some quotations today from very, very interesting people. One of them was saying that there's a digital divide, of course, but this is being narrowed down, the gap is being bridged. However, the motivational divide may be the next challenge to cover, meaning that thanks to information and communication technologies, knowledge is available to most of us, but not all of us have the right motivation to make the best use of this knowledge. So we've been measuring intelligence with IQ, but perhaps passion and persistence plus curiosity are going to be more relevant than intelligence. Knowledge is there, intelligence is there. The challenge here is, what do we do with them? And in this line, and quoting another thinker, the curious will learn. The resolute will overcome the obstacles in order to implement the ideas that they've developed while learning. But the coefficient, and that's perhaps wrong, may be more important than the intelligent one. So in this process of assessing the current education model, we may think, perhaps we need a more active education, more collaborative education, more mobile, more organic, as in opposition of a more rote, solitary, confined model that we've been seeing in previous years and traditionally. We've seen a siloed education, and perhaps we need to look towards an interdisciplinary education. And again, knowing is important, but perhaps questing is what makes a bigger difference at the end of the day. So to make it easy, maths and solving these kind of problems are crucial, and we all should know it. But on a daily basis, and in developing countries in particular, those are the problems that people are facing, and we need to develop the right skills in order to solve these particular problems. So some World Bank colleagues thought we may want to work in order to achieve this new model of education. How can we contribute into that? So they developed this massive multiplayer online learning game, actually based on social innovation and targeting people between 15 and 18 years old. It's the video we've seen at the beginning, right? This Evoke. It was based on a graphic novel without teacher in the room, without classroom. Actually, it's an online-based game. And actually, some of the participants, as we'll see, went a bit farther of the online and digital platform, and they started implementing some of the ideas that they developed during the training. This is the look and feel for you to have an idea. We've seen it in the video, but this is basic a graphic novel, as we said. So this is what may attract these teenagers to get engaged in this kind of activity and to get engaged in social innovation activities. And the mission of this online game, of this Evoke, is at the end of the day to engage these youth, for them to solve real problems. There were defined 7 new grand challenge missions, and let me go through them: literacy, conservation, food and energy, nuclear proliferation, community-based economic models, human trafficking, and peace and conflict resolution. But those names sound very grandiloquent. At the end of the day, what we asked the young participants of this game was to land these big concepts in their daily lives, to identify very specific and concrete problems, and to develop solutions for that. That was the idea. It was tested, you've seen it before, 2010. That was the first edition in South Africa. It has been replicated in other countries like Brazil and Mexico, and it is currently being replicated in Colombia. And we've been learning from each edition, as we'll see. So from the first edition, we have some lessons learned. For instance, 20,000 participants were registered. That was for the South Africa iteration, right? But actually, half of them were not even from Africa. So after perceiving this global demand, we had to replicate it in other regions. Well, I'll go forward. This one example, for instance, in this case, using foods such as garlic, for instance, they developed a natural fertilizer. And in other challenges, I can think now of the food security too. They used car wheels in order to create urban gardens in very densely populated slums in South Africa. So those are the kind of very specific challenges, like I live in a slum and we don't have many vegetables around, and a very specific solution was like, I'm going to recycle a car wheel so that I can have an urban garden right in my backyard. This is, again, the look and feel of the application. Participants were asked to post video blogs, for instance, to post blogs, and they received, as you can see here, several metrics, several measures on their activity, on their behavior. And we'll see later that this is very useful in order to evaluate how people are developing some skills that otherwise is very hard to measure. We'll see it later. So if we're preparing people for these 21st century skills, we can summarize those skills in 4 pillars. There could be other, right? But this is just for the sake of conceptualizing it. World visionary, deep collaborator, empathetic activist, and systems thinker, which means being for a social innovator, for this conceptual framework, we can have that a world visionary should have ideas, should be creative and innovative, should have personal and technical skills for communication, networking for collaboration, active engagement of peers in order to solve these problems that they have jointly identified, being able to mobilize himself and their peers again, the citizens, and having this critical thinking approach in order to solve the problems that we all identify on a daily basis. I will not go through all of them, but these different frameworks or baskets can be a bit more detailed on a specific skill and a specific dimension. So we can go through that later if needed. So going back to the game, there are several stages on that game for a participant to pass and to evolve. They would start exploring a topic such as, again, I use the example of food security. What does that mean? They would start imagining possible solutions, but a very conceptual stage still, desk research even. They would start thinking how that possible solution could be implemented, and then in teams they would evoke it. In this case, they used the term evocaize when they meant, at the end of the day, developing a business plan, right? Developing even a pitch in order to convince peers to implement that idea. And since now it's being replicated in several regions, we have here 3 examples. One is Mexico, Colombia, and South Africa, and each color represents a specific skill, let's say teamwork, let's say mathematics, for instance, right? So one participant from each country with a different skill would be grouped in order to tackle a specific challenge, such as human trafficking, literacy, water solutions, social innovation. These kind of multidisciplinary teams would allow different approaches and combining their skills in order to provide, to come up with a more complex and innovative idea. And here we can see with a couple of these mission examples, we've seen at the beginning that there were 10 weeks, 10 missions, right? So those are a couple of examples for these missions. And in the different phases, what are the activities, what are the questions that the participant has to solve? From food security, perhaps a teenager doesn't have a very clear understanding of what food security means. But after the phases, they get familiarized with the term. Again, they identify the problems, they come up with solutions, working with their peers, and at the end of the day, then have this elevator pitch, right, which is the very last item of this game. So now if we remember that slide that I showed, that guy with all the metrics on the bottom of the image, there's a set of skills that are hard even, not even to measure, but to observe sometimes. Is this guy a good team worker? Well, I have to see him work, right? And these kind of applications, although if you see the second column, which are unobservable skills, and you go to the third one, you can develop metrics, and a game can provide you evidence of each participant, how good is he or she at a specific skill based on his metrics. Has the guy been collaborating with other participants actively? Has he been cross-commenting with other people? Has been useful? Then you can see if his ideas made sense, if were applied or not. You can have an idea, a fairly objective idea, of whether he's a good team worker or not, for instance. So these metrics I was talking about were actually sourced by peer evaluation. Well, it was a complex, I mean, not complex, but elaborated evaluation scheme. And some of the results by the participants, we've seen before the figures, but the qualitative, here we can see the qualitative assessment of that. 60% of the participants felt that being part of that game allowed them to think big and to think of their future and to think that they could actually start something new. And if we think about these guys who saw in that picture who live in a slum in South Africa, this is not that trivial. They don't have that many opportunities to prove themselves that they are able to identify a daily basis problem and to provide a simple solution such as reusing the wheel to have an urban garden, for instance. That's a very important outcome of these, even it can be intangible, that's a very important outcome. Another one said, this game allowed me to put the idea out there and realize that they were not laughing at me. And that allowed me to grow confidence in myself and to know that I was able to go out there and this crazy idea I had to implement it, even to engage with other people to help me implement it. So we're here today to share with you this experience and to explain you this experience that was started in 2010 that has been replicated over and over in different regions and countries. If you want to replicate this same Evoke game, yeah, we would reach to the World Bank network of partners, which are traditional ministers, and we would partner with universities and with high schools in order to gather this knowledge and with NGOs. But that would work for the existing game. If we want to develop a new game, in that case, we need, of course, all those, but we need professionals like you, I assume. So for instance, last week I was in my office in Washington, D.C. I'm based in Washington. And a colleague stepped in my room. I have a roommate, an office mate, actually. And she asked my colleague, I want to develop that game in Liberia, in Africa. And I think that would be very useful to develop that social skill that with her particular project she was trying to develop. And she asked my colleague, does your son know how to code? Because I don't know how to start to develop that game. Perhaps your son knows how to code and he could help me. And I was listening to her like, come on, there's a bunch of professionals who are working on gamification, who could provide you with a cost-efficient solution. It just, we're sitting there in Washington, D.C., most of us, right? We're sitting there in Washington, D.C. We see, or some colleagues see the value of gamification, but they don't know even how to start. They don't know who to reach to. They don't know what could be the product of this collaboration. And again, I don't know you that well, but I imagine most or many of you are not that familiar with an institution like the World Bank. It could be Asian Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, wherever. And well, there's room for partnership. That's the main message we would like to convey here today. Just to raise awareness that even institutions for development who may seem very, very far away of your daily work, and I have to admit that vice versa, this community here is not my usual counterpart. So I would like to encourage you and my colleagues to bridge that gap, to know each other, and hopefully to collaborate for good, right? So for that, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues, Robert Hawkins, who is the one who developed this game, my colleague, Arturo Montekunigami, who was supposed to be here and really wanted to be here, but unfortunately could not make it, and myself, who I'm very happy to be here with you today. Please don't hesitate to drop us a line, to send us an email. We'll be very responsive and very happy to collaborate with you. Thank you very much.